The Black Talon instance is the first real big group flashpoint that you can do in Star Wars: The Old Republic, and there's a lot of story in instances in the Old Republic, which is really surprising coming from, you know, a game like Rift or World of Warcraft or something like that, where, you know, an instance is a dungeon full of monsters, and you go through, and that's that.
This was the only Flashpoint that I had a chance to play while I was in the beta, and the thing that really impressed me about it was the fact that there are these actual choices that you're making along the way. And these are repeatable quests, just like a dungeon in WoW, but the fact that as you're going through them each time, you're having these party conversations where everybody's kind of making conversation choices, but it targets one person who's actually going to give the response.
Right.
One character.
Basically, everybody rolls a die. Yeah. Whoever gets the highest roll, they are the speaking role for that part of the conversation, and they make the choice. And that can sometimes influence how the dungeon progresses and where you go and what you do. I actually saw some different looks in the Black Talon dungeon, which I've run several times now. There's totally different boss fights that you do, different encounters that you have.
Based off your conversation choices?
I think that's how it works.
Can you remember any specific examples? Because I didn't get a chance to try any like the party conversation stuff. Like,
sure.
Do you remember anything that kind of struck you by surprise or like?
There's some cool stuff where you have to talk to the captain because you've been charged to commandeer the ship. So you're commandeering the ship, and you've already killed dozens of his soldiers, sort of the Marines that are on board the Black Talon. You just cut your way through them because you're a bunch of Sith, right? So you get to the captain, and he doesn't want to do this. He thinks it's a suicide mission that they're being sent on, because they're not a military vessel, and they're just going to get wrecked by this Republic cruiser. So you have several options. You can actually kill the guy, and the crew reacts, and they're like, "Oh my God, the captain's dead! What do we do?"
And you're taking over the ship at that point, right?
Bounty Hunter, you have our attention. What would you have us do?
The cool thing, actually, if you look at how the conversation is structured, is that you get your light side or dark side points based on your choice, not on what choice the party makes, or whoever wins the conversation.
Which, having it the other way, would be really frustrating.
It would be
so it's a smart idea. By doing this, it's an easy way to go in and, if you're interested in exploring light side or dark side and really boosting your meter one way or the other, you can kind of go in and do that without fear that you're going to run into some party member who's like, "I'm just going to be an idiot all the time, just kill everybody."
And it's an MMO, so you're going to.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. I didn't totally get a grasp, but I'm curious if you started to get a little better picture of the way these like social points work.
So you get social points for participating in multiplayer conversations. You get them fairly quickly if you're doing any kind of dungeons or really just adventuring with anybody else. And they give you different abilities. It's like more emotes, more animations, that kind of thing. I mean, you're just going to get a ton of them if you're doing instances without any regularity, which you should be, because you get awesome loot, you get tons of experience, the stories are cool. The stories are very replayable, actually, because with all those choices that I was talking about, killing the captain, not killing the captain, and there's a bunch of those as the dungeon goes on. You can see totally different takes on this Black Talon mission.
Okay, so you can run the instance again and play around with your options. Yeah. Okay, that makes going for more gear again more interesting, I'd say.
It runs into a little bit of a problem. I suspect it'll be a little bit of a problem later on in the game when everybody's level capped, if it has the same kind of like end game dungeon running that most MMOs tend to have.
Where you could get sick of those conversations after a while.
Right, but theoretically you should be doing it with friends, and then everybody will be on the same page in terms of like, okay, let's just skip through this conversation, spacebar, spacebar, spacebar.
One thing we haven't talked about is just the partying system in general for these dungeons, for these flashpoints, which I also think is really cool. You've got 4 people instead of the slightly more traditional kind of 5-person dungeons. But that means that it's really set up so that you have one of each class potentially, or one of each role that you might want to bring in.
Which is generally going to be a healer, a tank, and 2 damage dealers.
Right. But on top of that, you have the option, because they have this companion system, if let's say just you and I are playing together.
Okay, fine.
Tim can't come because he's busy.
Or just really bad at the game. He's really going to bring us down. So,
did you try calling him hypothetically?
We didn't call him, but we're assuming he's busy.
Because he usually is.
He usually is.
He's getting social points. You know what I'm saying?
No, I get it.
So Adam and I are playing and totally screwing over Tim.
Right.
I think is the point. And we can do that because we've got our companions, and each one of us can call up one of our companions to play, and they actually fill a party role. And if you have for real players, like for maybe that one time that we do let Tim come along and one of his buddies.
Because he's been whining for weeks.
Okay, fine. Well, we're not going to bring Tim, but we'll bring 2 other people.
Okay.
Because I'm a Zabrak, isn't it?
Because of that, when we've had all 4 actual people, none of us bring along companions. Right. And so it's really flexible to being able to play with your friends without always having to worry about,
can we find a tank?
Yeah, or do I have to deal with these random other players? A lot of people, myself included, aren't especially enthusiastic about playing with just random people that we meet online.
Sure. Yeah, it's nice that you don't have to rely on complete strangers and that you have like this capable companion. I was really impressed with the AI of the companions. I know I didn't do a lot of dungeon crawling myself, but I could totally see how, as long as you have someone who can take the brunt of the damage if you're trying to do some distance stuff, like you could make your way through. You know, I'm curious about, just because I didn't have a lot of time to dive into these dungeons, like I know I'm going to make a comparison to WoW, which a lot of the dungeons layouts got really kind of samey and just sort of formulaic, and you saw a lot of the same textures and formations. Like as far as like variety in the environments, were you guys impressed, or did it seem just kind of generic after a while?
I mean, they're very different, the ones that I did. I mean, there's one that's on a space station, there's one that's on a spaceship, and the Black Talon one, as the ship moves along, you end up boarding the Republic
cruiser. Cinematic sequences.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's big cinematic sequences in the middle of it. There's a Jedi Padawan who is,
5 years old.
What?
Anakin killed a bunch of kids
in
Revenge of the Sith. I was wondering if that carried through into the MMO. Just a mob of kids.
See,
wasn't sure.
It's the no Russian part of the Old Republic, right?
Sounds controversial.
There's a Jedi Padawan who's there, and she makes this heroic sacrifice, and it's great because you're on the other side of the heroic sacrifice, right? Like she's like, you shall not pass. She's Gandalf on the bridge, and but you just murder the hell out of her.
Yeah. You're a dead woman.
I will not fall to one such as you. I will not.
So you kill her, and then you get to this general.
You can put aside your weapons. I won't try to run.
And one actually neat thing about the general is that he talks about how both sides are developing these super weapons, and they're all references to actual super weapons that show up in Star Wars canon.
If you knew what I knew, you'd understand. If you'd heard what both sides are plotting, you wouldn't be eager to restart this war. They're building doomsday weapons.
Oh, cool. So there's a reference to the Sun Crusher, I believe, from the was that the Kevin J. Anderson novels, the expanded universe stuff. There's a reference to the Death Star and like the Endor shield and stuff like that. It's pretty awesome.
Oh wow, they're getting that Death Star. That took a while.
I think like 4,000 years or 3,000 years or something. It's a big project. There were some cost overruns.
I also think probably some of that stuff is related to things that are going to show up in later
I would
content.
suspect.
Whether, maybe it's not the Death Star, but something like the Death Star or something like that in some instances.
World of Warcraft has this amazing lore. I think one of the most underrated stories as far as like their expanded universe 2 and what was established in Warcraft 3. But the framework of the game just did not capitalize on that stuff. Already BioWare is just blowing me away as far as the story goes, and I feel invested in my character, what's specifically happening in the greater universe. I can't wait to get back in there and experience more of this story content you guys are talking about.
You're no use to me alive.
And there are so many characters that are just really well realized. I love this, the Grand Moff that sends you on this mission that you eventually report back to. He's an interesting character. The Sith Lord that you serve as a Sith warrior, Darth Barris, is a fascinating character. The leader of the Jedi Council is this lady here whose name I don't remember, but she's a cool character. Obviously, Satele, yes.
Bastala's descendant.
That's right.
Satele Shan, right?
That's right.
For old KOTOR fans.
Oh yeah.
I think in the official canon too, it doesn't the line go from Bastila and Revan? I think in the canon they have kids and proceed, they proceed down the ages.
So this is potentially a long down the line descendant of Revan and Bastila.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
And she's now kind of high up there in the Jedi Council. We should talk about the other side of this equation from the opportunity to do all this group content is the fact that of the different MMOs I've played, I really think Old Republic might be the most solo friendly that I've encountered. There's really a route.
In the game.
What's that?
I didn't know Han was in the game.
Spoilers!
I like that voice.
That was good.
Yeah, that was good.
For people who are just wanting kind of the BioWare questing experience here. That's very possible to do, especially because of the presence of the companions.
There's a lot more interesting fights I found
Yeah.
in solo play, whereas like in a World of Warcraft, for instance, you're always kind of pulling one mob, fighting it, pulling the next mob, fighting it.
Maybe two.
Maybe two,
Right.
right? In Tor, I mean, it's all over the place. You'll fight groups of 3. You'll fight 1 strong enemy. You'll fight 2 strong enemies. I mean, there's a lot more leeway in the encounter design, I feel like.
Yeah, I loved that because usually with WoW, no matter what character I was playing, you know, I would approach a group of 3 people, and I feel like the crowd control options were really limited if you weren't the right class. I loved having, you know, the ability to fire a rocket one dude, send him flying while he's down, start working on his buddies. He runs back. Flamethrower everyone, like there's
Have your companion tank one guy.
yeah,
and all
absolutely.
That kind of stuff.
And just like the tactical variety, I had a lot of fun approaching groups. I didn't dread it like I probably would have in another MMO.
Yeah, and in terms of the dungeon here, in the Black Talent, like I really like the fact that, and this might be just because it is kind of a newbie dungeon, but I love the fact that you just run in and just start killing dudes. Like you don't worry about
Right.
like, okay, well we need to sheep this one, sap this other one, and then
sheep.
Space sheep. We'll space sheep this one, and we'll space sap this other one. No, I mean it's like you pull out the lightsaber and like you have force charge as a Sith warrior, which is just my favorite ability in the whole world because you just launch yourself through the air, like pull the lightsaber out and you just whack dudes. It's awesome. Tor seems a little bit more forgiving of mediocre play so far than World of Warcraft is, and that might be.
I mean, I'm doing fine, so.
But exactly. You haven't actually gotten yourself kicked out of too many groups.
Right.
I mean, that might be me coming from doing Cataclysm Heroics, like pre-nerf Cataclysm Heroics, which are rough, and then going to Star Wars newbie dungeons. I mean, there's going to be a gulf there. But nonetheless, you know, very friendly to all skill levels, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big looming question about the Old Republic for me is what that later content shapes up to be. I am completely sold on these 8 different class stories. There's a really strong part of me who feels like I kind of want to try them all out and see which ones I really enjoy.
See you later, Miller.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
hundreds
huge.
of hours.
It's
to
hundreds
get
of
through.
hours. I think for people who are a little bit more used to some of that high-level raid stuff in WoW or other games, there is still that question about what that content's going to be like. How repeatable is that later content going to be? How fast am I going to get there? Once I'm there, is it going to be fun? And that's probably a question that we're not going to have a full answer to until the game is
Right.
actually out.
Yeah,
and we've got a lot of people up at level cap and that kind of thing.
And BioWare said that there's a whole planet devoted to solo content, which I know you're excited about. I mean,
that's cool.
I don't tend to solo that much at cap. Like, I really like doing group stuff, doing raids, like conquer. You know, I'm an achiever in terms of the MMO archetypes, right? I'm more concerned about like, are the raids going to be any good? Does the group interaction come together like WoW does? Because like in WoW and Rift for that matter, the interactions between classes are really tight, and everybody has specific roles and things that they're really good at. And so if BioWare can nail that part reasonably well, I could see a long career for myself in the Old Republic.
Those of us who've played in the beta, I think almost without exception, we're all like thinking December 20th comes around and we're gonna start investing some time. So.
Absolutely.
Yep. So.
Maybe you guys can let me group with you.
We'll
Yeah.
see.
Okay, well, give it some thought, please. You will group with me.
Can we just cut there?